never-before-seen evidence from the special counsel Jack Smith's election subversion case against Donald Trump. Our chief legal affairs correspondent, Paula Reed, has been digging into this newly unsealed filing for us. Paula, how does Jack Smith make his case against Donald Trump?
Well, Wolf, in this nearly 170-page filing, the special counsel lays out how they see their case after the Supreme Court ruled that Trump has partial immunity, that he cannot be prosecuted for anything that he was doing in his official capacity as president, and that his official actions also cannot be used as evidence in a case. So here in this new filing, they are emphasizing that they allege that everything he was doing to subvert the election was done in his private capacity. So they argue, quote, when the defendant lost the 2020 presidential election, he resorted to crimes to try to stay in office. With his private co-conspirators, the defendant launched a series of increasingly desperate plans to overturn the legitimate election results. They go on to point out, saying, quote, it is hard to imagine stronger evidence that conduct is private than when the president excludes his White House counsel and only wishes to have his private counsel present. Now, this is the fullest picture that we have gotten of the evidence that was gathered in the course of this investigation. This case is not going to trial anytime soon. If Trump is reelected, it's expected his attorney general will dismiss this case. So this is the last opportunity for voters to see this evidence before Election Day in November.
And how's the Trump team responding, at least so far?
So they're responding by tying the release of this information to the election. And Wolf, it is extraordinary to have this kind of document released detailing a years-long criminal investigation before trial. This is usually the kind of thing that's in an opening statement at a trial where you have a chance to defend yourself. So here the campaign has released a statement saying, quote, the release of this falsehood-ridden, unconstitutional January 6th brief immediately following Tim Walz's disastrous debate performance is another obvious attempt by the Harris-Biden regime to undermine American democracy and interfere in this election. Wolf, as you know, the Trump team has repeatedly argued across all of Trump's criminal cases that they are all efforts to somehow interfere in the election. The Supreme Court reviewed this case, and they really only weighed in on the issue of immunity and where Trump might have some protections. And they told the lower court judge, look, review this case in light of what we said about immunity and decide which parts of this case remain. And I will also note that the Supreme Court is really largely to credit for why this did not go to trial before the election. From December to July, they waited to weigh in on this issue of immunity. So while Trump's team gets a lot of credit for delaying these cases, really the credit is due to the Supreme Court that did not allow the special counsel to proceed with this case before the election.
Very interesting, a very big deal indeed. Paula Reed, thank you very much. Our legal experts are here with me in the Situation Room for some more analysis right now. And Elliot Williams, this is what, 170 pages, detail after detail, including a lot of brand new information that we have never known of before. Tell us a little bit about what your thought is. How strong is this Jack Smith case, this federal case against Trump?
It crafts a very powerful narrative of the alleged wrongdoing against the former president. And just to step back a little bit, Wolf, the Supreme Court really left open a lot of questions, and I'd even go as far as to say created a bit of a mess in the law with the Supreme Court decision that they decided back this summer. They'd said that only official acts of the president are protected, private acts are not, but it gave very little guidance as to where the distinction would be. It falls to Judge Tanya Chutkan, the judge overseeing this case, to sort that out. This brief seeks to sort of draw that distinction. One of the most, and it's things like this, it's are Donald Trump's conversations with Mike Pence considered protected or not? Well, one of the things they lay out is that Mike Pence's role is actually a legislative role, not a White House role. It's laid out when Mike Pence oversaw the counting of ballots, or the certification of ballots, he was doing so in his capacity as president of the Senate. That's not an official White House role. And they do that page after page, time after again in this document, saying these are not official acts of the presidency. These are the acts of a candidate running for office and a private individual.
That's why they're making the case in this document that he is not immune from prosecution. A major filing in the special counsel's election subversion case against Donald Trump just unsealed by Judge Tanya Chutkan. Joining us now is former Trump attorney Tim Parlatore. Tim, thanks for joining us. Prosecutors in this lengthy 170-page document, the filing, write about a meeting that Trump barred his White House counsel from attending. And I'm quoting now from the document. It is hard to imagine stronger evidence that conduct is private than when the president excludes his White House counsel and only wishes to have his private counsel president. Tim, what do you make of that argument?
No, I think that this document is well written, for the purpose of trying to overcome the immunity. This case always suffered from the issue of what is he doing in his capacity as president and what is he doing in his capacity as a candidate. And so, this document is entirely written to try to frame everything as being in his capacity as candidate, which admittedly, a lot of these things, that happened during that time would be in his capacity as a candidate. So that does make sense to raise that argument.
Yeah, because the Supreme Court ruled he has immunity for official acts, but not necessarily for private acts. And this document makes the case that these were all private acts on his part. I want to read another part of the filing about what Trump told then Vice President Mike Pence as he was trying to get him to overturn the results of the election. And I'm quoting now. The defendant told him that hundreds of thousands of people are going to hate your guts and people are going to think you're stupid. That's a quote. And berated him, pointedly adding, "You're too honest." What does this say about the pressure campaign against Pence and Trump's state of mind?
Well, this is obviously it's a document written by a prosecutor, so we'll see how much of this actually comes out of trial. And I think that's kind of a problem. You have to remember one thing. I find it very interesting that this document tries to cast Mike Pence as, the running mate and also as the president of the Senate in an effort to try to move all of Trump's conduct away from being president and into candidate. And yet it wasn't that long ago that Jack Smith was in the DC courthouse saying, in an effort to force Mike Pence to testify, that no, he was not acting in his capacity as president of the Senate because that would have provided him the privilege to not testify. So back then he said he wasn't the president of the Senate to get exactly the quote that you just read to me there. And now he's turned around and gone the other way. So I think he's going to have some legal issues with that.
Trump is calling this latest filing a hit job against him, claiming without evidence it's designed to influence the election. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I do think that the timing could be better, for appearances purposes. They asked for a briefing schedule that, this was filed, a few weeks ago, and then it took a few weeks for it to be unsealed. It's very detailed. Donald Trump's response isn't going to be for another couple of weeks. And then for that to take a couple of weeks to be unsealed, we're unlikely to be able to see his response to this until after the election. So certainly the timing is something that can give it the appearance that it is being done, for that messaging. And even your discussions with prior guests here tonight, it shows that people are reading this in the context of an election, not just in the context of a criminal proceeding, which is what it's intended for.
Tim Parlatore, thanks very much for joining us.